Well, today I am interviewing Alabama lawyer John Watts, good friend of mine, and he is, like me, he is an elder law lawyer and also does veterans benefits. John, I want to welcome you today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks. I'm glad you're taking the time to do this because this is a very important topic, and I want everybody to know as much as possible about the way you do things. We both do this kind of work involving veterans benefits, and it's very important work, and it helps a lot of people. And we're going to try to extend that message today so we can help more. So again, welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As Davis said, my name is John Watts. I'm an elder law attorney in Birmingham, Alabama, and like Davis, I'm a VA accredited attorney, which means that I can advise veterans about benefits, including this VA pension that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, it is an important topic, and I'd like you to start by, I've got a lot of questions for you here. I had to write them down. I had so many. What I'd like you to do is start by explaining a little bit about, give people an overview of what this thing is called VA Improved Pension. What is it?
Okay. Well, this VA Improved Pension, some people call it just VA pension, some people call it aid in attendance, and this is a non-service related benefit. So it doesn't have anything to do with being injured while in military service. It just means that we qualify, and now because of our health situation where maybe we're having trouble getting around or living alone, now this benefit can pay a pretty substantial amount of tax-free money. So very important benefit to deal with long-term care issues. Good,
very good. Well, what do people get out of this? I mean, one of the early questions I always get is, what's in it for me? What does I get if I qualify for this particular benefit?
Sure, great question. This is unlike Alabama Medicaid or Georgia Medicaid, where the money goes to a facility. Instead, this money for the VA pension comes directly to the veteran or to the surviving spouse of the veteran. And it's based on whether we're talking about a veteran who's married or a single veteran or a surviving spouse, different levels of compensation. And it depends on what our need is, but just to kind of give the two ends of it here. For a married veteran who needs aid in attendance, and I think we'll probably talk about that in just a minute, that's around $25,000 a year tax-free. So 5 years, if my math is right, that'd be $125,000 tax-free. So pretty remarkable benefit. And even for a surviving spouse, it's about $13,000 a year. So over 5 years, that would be $65,000 or so. Again, tax-free. And Davis, I suspect you're like us. A lot of times our clients are living only on Social Security. So it may be a married couple that's living on $1,200, $1,300 a month. Well, if we can add over $2,000 a month tax-free, that makes a huge difference. For a widow living on $800 a month Social Security, to add another $1,100 is all the difference in the world.
Well, it certainly sounds like it can alter the quality of life of a veteran or a surviving spouse by having this particular benefit. So I'm thinking the next question people are going to ask is, how do I get qualified? What are the requirements that I have to meet to be eligible for this particular benefit? And you and I tend to divide that up into three areas. We talk about the military service of the veteran, we talk about the health of the claimant for the benefit, and then we talk about the financial requirements that have to be met. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, starting with the military requirements?
Sure. And this is the starting point for anybody that contacts us, whether it's the veteran himself or herself, or whether it's a surviving spouse, and that is, did the veteran serve during a time of war? And We need 1 day of active duty during a time of war, and a total of 90 days of active duty, consecutive active duty, but just 1 day during a time of war. And a time of war is basically follows what we learned in history. So World War II, although the VA actually extends that to 46, Korean War from about 50 to 55. Vietnam, it does make a difference whether we were in country or not in the country of Vietnam. But with that one exception, to be a wartime veteran does not have anything to do with being in combat or overseas. So you could be at Anniston the whole time, or you could be a military police, or you could be in Alaska at a radar station, whatever the situation may be. You do not have to be in combat to be a, quote, wartime veteran. And then we need an honorable discharge. And I guess to be technically correct, it's a better than dishonorable, but I know you're like me, we kind of like to make it very practical. An honorable discharge is what we're talking about for 99% of the people that either one of us have ever represented. So if we are a veteran, 1 day of active duty during time of war, honorable discharge, then that military requirement is satisfied, and there's really nothing else we have to do with that.
Well, that sounds pretty easy, pretty straightforward, not a lot of questions associated with that. How about the other two requirements? In particular, let's start with the health requirements. There, things can get a little bit more technical, I believe.
It does, and if the veteran is alive, then we focus on the veteran's health. Now, if the veteran's passed away, then we focus on his widow's health. And what we're looking at is, rather than giving you all the fancy technical stuff, just do you need help just living? Or is it okay to live by yourself? Or does somebody in your family say, now wait a minute, Dad just doesn't need to be living alone? Well, then we always ask the question, why? Why can this person not live alone? Why does your mother need to not be alone? Well, then that usually, we get answers such as, well, she's at risk if she takes a shower. She might fall. Or she cannot do medication management, or she has dementia or Alzheimer's. And so there are two levels of the way the VA looks at us. One is called housebound, which means I can't just get in my car and go. Or I can't just go walk to the bus station or walk to the store. I need somebody to help me to leave my house. And a little bit higher level, the highest level of benefits, is aid and attendance. And that's why sometimes we refer to it and our clients refer to it as the whole benefit's called aid and attendance. It's not technically correct, but as a practical matter, that's what we're looking at. And that just says, do I need help with activities of daily living? So, Davis, I know we have different ways that we try to use to illustrate it. One way that I use is, this morning I got up, I got in the shower, I went to the bathroom, I got dressed, I got something to eat, I drove myself to work, I can do all these things on my own. Well, those are activities of daily living. Now, if I ever get to a point where I cannot do those things on my own, where I need my children or somebody else to help me get dressed or to help me go to the bathroom or to take a shower, take a bath, now I need the aid and attendance of somebody else to help me with those things. So at that point, then the VA says, okay, you qualify under that medical requirement. And there are some doctor forms and things of that nature, but that's the basic second requirement.
Right. Well, from some of the things you said here, it sounds like some unique benefits associated with this particular program. And I want to explore one in particular because it deals with a great concern that just about every one of my clients has, and that is the need that they might be forced to go into a nursing home prematurely, in part for financial reasons. Is there any way this can keep people at home longer, for example, or help them afford an assisted living facility?
Right, I'm sure all of my clients are the same as yours. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, today would be a great day to go to the nursing home. No, nobody wants to go to a nursing home. Now, when we walk into a nursing home, though, we look over here and a room is filled, and we look over there, a room is filled. The nursing homes are filled with people who do not want to be there. And sometimes there's simply no choice. I mean, if you have the wrong kind of stroke or a bad fall, there may be no way your family can care for you at home. But what's sad is, and I think this is what you were asking about, is when people go to a nursing home, when they could have stayed at home, but because of money, they have to go to a nursing home and get on Alabama Medicaid. Because as a practical matter, Alabama Medicaid will only pay for care in a nursing home. We just, as a practical matter, don't pay for care in assisted living or at home. So this benefit can give us the money so that we can then, instead of having to leave our home and go to where the help is, we can bring the help to us at home. And that is what every one of my clients, they want to be able to stay at home. And if they have to go to an assisted living, they want to stay there and not then have to go to a nursing home. So it's a great benefit to get that money into us so that we can stay at home.
Well, it certainly sounds like there's a lot of flexibility in the way this program can be applied, because it does get paid in cash and it does get paid directly to the veteran or to the surviving spouse. So I'm sure a lot of people watching this are thinking, you know, it sounds like maybe I don't meet all the qualifications here. I want to talk next about the financial part of it, because that seems to be the place where we have the issues come up about eligibility. So let's talk about that third part of this here, about the a little more in detail about the financial requirements to be eligible for the program.
Sure, and that's where, you know, again, our practices are very similar. The financial aspect is where people often, if they ever find out about this benefit, they say, well, I don't qualify. Here's what we're talking about. Two things. First of all is the income. So the VA looks at our household income, and then they compare that with the benefit that they would pay. And the practical matter is we want to get our income down as low as possible, legitimately, within the rules of the VA. And the VA allows us to do that with certain unreimbursed medical expenses, which in the right situation can even be family members that are providing care for us. And then there's an asset level where the VA says, okay, certain assets count and certain do not count. So our house does not count, our car does not count, but generally other assets will count. And there's a certain level. Unfortunately, it's not quite defined, as you and I know. We just have to use our judgment on what that is, but we have a pretty good sense of what that is. And so if the assets are above that, the VA will say, well, I'm sorry, you do not qualify. And that's where the few people that actually find out about this benefit, the vast majority of those few people figure, well, there's nothing I can do because the VA says I make too much money and I own too much stuff.
Is there anything they can do about that? Let's say they are in that position. They say, you know, boy, it sounds like this would be ideal. I could certainly use that extra money because I am incurring additional. I'm not getting the care I need because I can't afford it. In that case, is there anything they can do to become eligible even if they're not today? Are there active steps they can take to become qualified?
Yes, and let's start with the income. The VA has rules, they don't always make sense. You know, and I know we've expressed frustration about this. Sometimes the VA does not consider pharmacy bills to be unreimbursed medical expenses. But yet if we're in an assisted living, the entire cost of that normally is a, quote, unreimbursed medical expense. But the thing that most people don't know about, and the VA certainly does not advertise this, well, they don't advertise any of the program, but they certainly don't advertise this, that if I'm a veteran at home and say my adult daughter is taking care of me, Well, I can actually pay her, and the VA will count that as a medical expense, even if she's not a nurse, not a doctor. And there are a number of requirements that have to take place for that. So there are ways, there are strategies, there are planning techniques to take our income from up here where it's too high to legitimately bring it down to where we can now get this benefit. And for the assets right now, and we're recording this right at the first of the year, there's no limitation or restriction from the VA standpoint on me as a veteran giving away assets, transferring assets to, could be family, or to a charity, or to a trust, or to any place I want to send it. The VA does not have a problem with that. Now, they're talking about making that having a so-called look-back period where when you apply, the VA will then look backwards in time and say, kind of like they're looking at your financial, did you give away anything? And if you did, there can be some penalties. But right now, we don't have that issue. And so, yes, if somebody is a wartime veteran and medically, health-wise, they need this benefit, the financial, we can almost always make that work. So I encourage people not to let that sort of initial look at the financial make them say, oh, well, this benefit's not for me. No, it can be for you. We just have to plan and to implement a strategy that fits within the rules of the VA.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there right now who are saying that this is a fantastic benefit. In fact, and as you've just described, there are situations where the benefit can more than double the household income for the veteran family. And so that can make a huge difference in the quality of their life. But the thing that's always struck me is how few people are actually receiving this benefit today. I've heard numbers from the VA that as low as only about 300,000 or 350,000 people are getting this. So obviously the word is not getting out there that this is available. And I know I was a lawyer for a long time before I even knew about this benefit. And I think you have a story about how you came somewhat late to know about this benefit as well.
Yeah, and you know, we have, it's a fact that very few people know about this, very few people get this benefit. And then we say, well, why? Why are people not knowing about it? And I think in part because when we think of VA benefits, we really think of the serviceman or servicewoman who was injured. And there's a benefit for those folks, and that's very important. But that kind of dominates the news. You know, that's what we hear about, maybe with Vietnam, Agent Orange, or the Persian Gulf, all sorts of problems people are dealing with. But then when you hear about this VA pension, if you happen to hear about it, it sometimes sounds too good to be true. And I was at a conference, not a legal conference, but just a business conference, and during a break, a gentleman came up to me and said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a lawyer. He goes, oh, I'm a lawyer too. And you know, we kind of had that connection. And he says, well, what type of work do you do? And I said, well, I litigate cases in federal court and help consumers. And he goes, oh, well, I help veterans. And I thought, well, that's great. You know, that's very needed. And he said, I help them in a way nobody knows about. My first thought was, really? Nobody knows about this. And then he kind of looked around and said, I found this secret government benefit for veterans. And I'm kind of like pulling back a little bit going, really, secret government benefit? I've been a lawyer all these years, and you know, I know all these federal laws, and I've never heard of this. And then he said, if you pay me money, I'll tell you about it. And so I got all sorts of little alarm bells going off in my head going, you know, get out of here, get out of here. And so I left that meeting, and I remember I called my law partner, and I said, yeah, you'll never believe I ran into this crazy guy that, you know, said he had this secret government benefit. And I never thought about it again. Then I had family members who and still are wartime veterans or widows of wartime veterans, and their health started to decline. I didn't think about this benefit. I had friends and clients who would tell me about the issue with, mom's got dementia now, and her husband, deceased husband, was a wartime veteran. What can we do? I don't know. I knew about Medicaid and nursing home, but I didn't know about this benefit. So I say all that to say, I don't regret being skeptical, Davis, because I think there are a lot of scams, and if you get emails, somebody wants to run $10 million through your account and give you $3 million. It's wise to be skeptical, but my mistake was, and I hope you don't make this mistake, was I did not investigate this benefit. I should have said, well, let me check out, does the VA website mention this benefit? Let me go talk to other people about this. And so that's where I made the mistake of not following up on this. And we just want to encourage people to find out about this benefit and see if it applies to you. And if you're skeptical, that's good. Be skeptical, but investigate.
Absolutely. And I know that many of our clients, and we hear this all the time, that the discussions within the family are, someone will say, this sounds too good to be true. It is, because it gets paid in cash and all the other features, and its flexibility is unusual for any government benefit. But this idea that it's too good to be true, and so a lot of people are stopping there. They're not doing anything at all, so they're not educating themselves. But for those who do want to pursue it and to find out more, how do they do that? Where do they go for the information that they need? I know I've seen a lot of misinformation, a lot of misleading information on the internet about this, because there are a lot of people who have tried to capitalize on it, not for the benefit of the veteran. So where do they go to get reliable information?
Well, that's a great question, and it's kind of the joke. Somebody says, well, I read on the internet, it must be true, Davis, So again, we need to be skeptical, but the VA website, you can go and type in about this special or improved pension, and it'll describe it to you, and that can give you a lot of assurance. Hey, this is really legitimate. People in Alabama can go to my website, alabamaelderlawyer.com, and so you can start to look at it and investigate it. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of scams out there, a lot of people taking advantage of veterans. So the message I'd like to leave on this point is, make sure that whatever advice you get is going to be in the veteran or the widow's best interest. And we should not do the VA pension in a vacuum. Now, unfortunately, we see a lot of people out there doing that. It's as if they have blinders on and all they can see is the VA pension, because they're trying to sell you some financial product, and there are appropriate products out there, but they do not look at Alabama Medicaid. And there are different rules, and there's kind of a tension, Davis, between what can you do with VA, what can you do with Medicaid. And so it's not that one's right, one's wrong, it's just we have to be aware of both of those programs. And then, and this was something that I appreciate you taught me, is we always look at what's in the best interest of the veteran. Sometimes it's to not get this benefit, even if they qualify or could qualify. Sometimes we don't want to give away $1 million worth of assets to get this benefit based upon a particular circumstance. So we really have to look at it in a, what's the word now, holistic way, kind of look at everything and make sure that it makes sense, even if we can qualify for this benefit. And so that's why I just encourage people to investigate it and to make sure that you're getting the right advice. And if I can just say one more thing, here's a simple test. If somebody says, I want to explain this benefit to you, and here's how much it'll cost you for me to explain it to you or for me to apply for you, then I would run the other way. That is a perfect warning that you're dealing with somebody who's not legitimate.
Now, I know that some of the solutions that you and I talk about, we often need to involve other family members, so they need to know as well. So I think, aren't you, you're like I am, in the sense that I encourage the rest of the family to participate. For example, probably in better than half of our cases, an adult child is already providing some kind of care for an elderly father or mother. And so we need their support, we need their buy-in on this, don't we?
Right, and we always tell the veterans, it's up to you. If you want your children involved, but as you mentioned, a lot of times the solution involves the children. And we certainly encourage people, have your children at the meeting or have them on the phone with us. Materials that we prepare and we give away. If your children want those, we want them to have them. And I know, for example, if my mother said, hey, I'm going to go meet with fill in the blank, a lawyer, a financial advisor, insurance person, I would want to know more about that, and I would want to either be there or to have my brother be there with her, just so you have that somebody else, a second set of eyes, and it's kind of like going to the doctor. You want to have a family member with you. And so we strongly encourage family members to be involved in this, to be educated, and what we certainly respect the attorney-client privilege. I don't want to be misunderstood on that, but we are as transparent as possible. We do not want to say, now don't tell your children that you're talking to me. Again, if somebody is saying that ought to be a warning sign that, well, why would they not want my adult children to know about this or my granddaughter to know about this? So we encourage a family to come together, because to solve the problem of long-term care, whether we're in a crisis right now or we can see it coming, the family's got to pull together. You can't do it by yourself.
Okay. At this point, I'm thinking some of these people are saying, it sounds like maybe I might be a good candidate for this particular benefit. So what's the very next step they need to take? Should it be to contact you?
Yeah, that's certainly fine. You can call my office at 205-879-2447 or go to alabamaelderlawyer.com. And we have has our phone number, has contact information. Generally, the way that I do it, you'll initially speak with a lady named Carolyn, and she's a very nice lady, very experienced. And what she'll do is just get a quick sense of what your situation is. When did you serve in the military, or when did maybe your deceased husband served in the military, and then, well, tell me a little bit about your limitations or the help that you need. And because we get, and I know you do too, we get 90-year-old healthy veterans that say, well, I'm in great shape now, but what do I do if I ever need this in the future? And then we have veterans that are really struggling, really in bad shape medically, and the family's providing round-the-clock care. So give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you. There's no charge for that. We don't charge to talk to people about this benefit. And then Carolyn will get that information to me, and then we can set up a call or a meeting in person, and then we can go over it and find out, first, do you qualify? And if you don't qualify, can you qualify? And if you can qualify, does it make sense to do that? And again, the focus is going to be what's on the best interest of the veteran or the widow of a veteran.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but I believe you represent veterans all over the state of Alabama. So we're not just talking here, right? We're in Birmingham. So not just here, but all over the state, you're
right.
able to help them.
Yes.
Good. The final thing, and I know this is on everybody's mind, is what does this cost? How do I get charged for doing the work that you do? Why don't you tell us a little bit about whether you charge for doing the claim to the VA or just for the legal work? How does it work with you?
Okay. Yeah, and that's a question. I'm a consumer too. When I'm buying something or seeing a doctor, whoever it may be. So, that's a very natural question. And just start with the very simple, nobody, including lawyers, can charge to prepare the petition or prepare the claim, the initial claim that's filed with the VA. So if anybody tries to charge you on that, I would run the opposite direction. Now, what we can do, and the VA has said that this is perfectly fine, is if there's legal work that you need done, then you can hire a lawyer to do the legal work. And because you may take, for example, having too much in the way of assets. You may not qualify, but if you transfer those assets to the right person at the right time in the right manner, then you may qualify. Well, that's legal work involved, and so we charge for that. With the income being too high, there are things we can do to bring that income down. Just like, with taxes. We have a gross income and then we get to take deductions and lower those taxes. Same thing here. Well, if there's legal work involved, then we charge for that. Now, I personally like to know what I'm going to pay for something. And so I am not a fan of an hourly rate. I guess if somebody insisted, I guess I would do it. Nobody's ever, tried to convince me to do an hourly rate. We do a flat fee. We say, okay, here's your situation. Yes, I think I can help you. Yes, I think it's appropriate to help you. Now, here's the solution and here's the cost. And it was one flat fee. So we don't want people nervous about calling us or sending an email or a letter because, I'm going to get a bill in the mail for it. No, it's all covered. That's what you're paying for, is to have access to us and for us to help you get this solution. And we always try to put our fees in the context of, well, what benefit do you get? So here's what you're going to be spending on the legal fee. Now here's the result that you are looking for, so that people can have an idea of how to evaluate that fee.
Right. I have one more question. I should have asked this one earlier, and I want to explore for just a minute where this particular benefit fits in the scheme of benefits that the Department of Veterans Affairs offers. And this is a so-called non-service connected benefit. There is another major benefit that we hear about a lot in the news, we mentioned earlier, and that is disability compensation. And one of the things I'm seeing more and more are Vietnam War era veterans who are receiving perhaps already either have never filed for disability compensation, or they're getting maybe a very, very small compensation payment because perhaps the VA rated them only 10% disabled. But they're having long-term care problems now. They're suffering from PTSD and a lot of other problems. Is there any way that you could, let's say that they come to you and they want to say, I'd really like to get my disability compensation increased from 10% to 30% or 50%, but I have these issues right now with long-term care. Is there any way that you could do both at the same time?
Yes.
And if so, could I get both benefits?
Yeah, and that's a great question and I think a really important point. Some lawyers only do the VA compensation or the disability. Some lawyers only do the pension. But when you do both, then you can kind of sit back and look at it and say, all right, well, here's how we can make these work together. Now, Davis, you and I know from experience, the VA compensation, that's the service-related claims, those can take years to fully go through the process. Well, the VA pension normally is more like 3, 4, 5 months. So it's much quicker. And so if we have a service-related injury, we can get that compensation, that disability rating, but it may take us a long time. Well, in the meantime, let's apply for this VA pension. And let's get that to get some money coming in so that the family can provide for those needs. And then down the road, when that disability, that service-related kicks in, then we can get that, assuming that that's higher. The VA will not let us get both. They'll let us apply for both, but not actually receive both benefits, it'll just say, well, you get the highest. And so that's a good thing. And so at the higher levels, the disability can be significantly more than the VA pension.
So that says then if I'm getting disability compensation today, but it's a small amount, maybe just a couple of $100s, maybe I could, during the transition period I'm waiting for an increase, I could actually get the VA pension because that's the larger number, and then surrender that when I get my increase in my disability compensation.
Right, that's right. Or let's say somebody has the 10 or 20% service-related disability, and then they have a stroke, completely unrelated. Well, that disability money is not going to increase. Okay, maybe it was an injury to the arm or injury to the leg. But I've seen veterans that say, well, I'm already getting the VA disability, so I guess I can't get that. No, you can get the highest of it. So the kind of bottom line is, if you think there's a chance that you qualify or could qualify for the VA pension, then I really recommend you check out your options. Because, again, if you don't know what your rights are, then you can't take the correct action. And so you want to educate yourself and figure out, because maybe you don't qualify now, but you can make some changes and qualify. And, Davis, I know we've talked about this before just privately, that there are some people, and it seems like it's in the news more and more, where people are being critical of veterans for taking advantage of this. And if we have another minute, I'd like to...
Absolutely. I think you ought to address that. Very important point.
Yeah, this is something that I know you and I are both pretty laid back, but this does kind of get under our skin a little bit when we hear people say, oh, you know what, those veterans, they shouldn't try to get this VA pension. If you don't qualify, take no steps to qualify. And now, of course, that's not people that are having trouble getting dressed and people having trouble bathing themselves saying that. That's able-bodied people that are looking down on the veteran saying, well, you don't need to qualify for that. And what irks me about that is if we grab any of those people saying that and we say, let me ask you this, do you make money? They go, oh, yeah, absolutely, I make money. Well, do you pay taxes? Well, of course I pay taxes. Well, let me ask you this, do you take a deduction for your mortgage payment? Well, of course I do. Well, do you have children living at home? Do you reduce your income? Well, absolutely. It'd be un-American to not do that. Well, see, why do they do that? Because they should just pay more taxes if they think people shouldn't get benefits from the government. But they go, oh, no, I'm going to pay the bare minimum in taxes. That's my God-given right as an American. Okay, I agree with that, as long as you stay within the rules. But same thing for our clients, Davis. If the VA says, here are the rules, and we stay within those rules, but we can make some changes. And just like with our taxes, we might take something now because that'll give us a tax benefit. In the business world, you see people say, well, go ahead and buy things at the end of 2013 to reduce your taxes for 2013. Okay. Or when do we contribute to an IRA? Well, there's certain deadlines. Same thing here. People can take steps to qualify for this, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to share one story, and I'll give you credit because you're the one that told me this story. But I think it's just so important. There was a Supreme Court justice that worked obviously in D.C., but like a lot of people lived in Virginia, and he had two paths to get home, two bridges. One was a toll bridge, and one was not. So he has a choice. Do I go the toll bridge and pay the $1 or $5, whatever it is? Well, that goes to the government. Or he could, by rearranging his schedule a little bit, he could take the non-toll bridge. And so he asked himself this question, is it legal for me to not take the toll bridge? Well, obviously, he doesn't have to take the toll bridge. But then, thinking about, am I morally obligated to take the toll bridge because that would give more money to the government. Well, no. The government said, you can go this way and pay $5, or you can go this way and pay nothing. Well, you pay taxes. And he said, you know, I have the choice. If I want to go to the toll booth, that's fine. If I want to take the bridge that is free, I can do that. Same thing with our clients with taxes, and especially with these VA pension benefits. And I can't remember if I said this, Davis, but I want to make the point. This is not charity. This is not welfare. Not just anybody can get this benefit. It's only wartime veterans and surviving spouses. And sometimes people come to us, they say, well, you know, I was almost a wartime veteran. Does that qualify? No, it's only, or somebody says, well, I was married to a veteran and then I divorced him and then 5 years later he died, and now I need help. Well, you're not a surviving spouse.
Correct.
And so we don't expand those rules. That would be wrong. But we don't let anybody contract and shrink those benefits and say, well, you shouldn't get it. So I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now, but that really bothers me when people say that, because so few people even know about these benefits, and then they call the VA and the VA says, oh, you make too much money. And then when they start thinking, well, maybe there's something I can do, then somebody gets on TV and says, oh, you're being wrong to try to plan for this. And it's hurting the people that served during a time of war who now need our help, and they earn this benefit, and we shouldn't do anything to take it away.
Exactly. I agree with you completely on that. Well, I see our time's just about to run out here. Any final points you'd like to make here that you want people to know about before we close?
Yeah, I really just, first of all, thank you for having me. But
My pleasure.
The main thing is just look into this. Don't assume, well, we probably don't qualify. I mean, that assumption could be a $25,000 a year mistake, and it could be the difference between your husband or your father or your mother staying at home where they want to be and going completely broke and having to go into a nursing home. And so don't make any assumptions. Investigate it. If you live in Alabama and have a question, there's no charge. We'll talk to you. It's 205-879-2447 or alabamaelderlawyer.com. And again, thank you for having me.
John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.